Welcome to my Bart story.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're turning our attention to a truly pivotal moment in biblical history.
Yeah.
Really, a story that speaks volumes about divine promise, human patience, and the powerful dawn of a new world.
That's right. We'll be diving into Genesis chapter 8, verses 1 through 19.
Focusing on those fascinating details of the Great Flood's recession and what this profound narrative reveals about God's unwavering character and, of course, our own faith journey.
Exactly. And our mission today is really to unpack the rich theological nuggets and maybe some surprising insights from this section of our study note.
Giving you a shortcut, hopefully, to being truly well-informed about this foundational text.
And we have so much to explore from the notes provided to us, which offer, a really multifaceted look at this passage. We're going to go beyond just the surface story.
Yeah, uncover deeper meanings, that crucial historical and cultural context, and find some incredibly powerful applications for our lives and ministries today.
It's a story that's far richer than many of us might initially realize, I think. Hashtag, scripture reading and initial observation. Okay, let's turn to our study note, starting with Genesis 8, verse 1 from the NIV. It reads, "But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded."
So what immediately leaps out at us here, and it truly forms the narrative's pivot point, is that phrase, God remembered Noah.
Remembered. That sounds simple, but you're saying it's more complex.
Oh, absolutely. In Hebrew, the word is zakar. And this isn't just God, recalling a memory, like we might try to remember where we left our keys. No.
Okay.
Zakar, in this biblical context, signifies something far more dynamic. It's active. Scholars like Kenneth Matthews, in the NAC series, and Victor Hamilton and NICOT, they both really emphasize this. It's a purposeful, active turning towards someone, often in the context of a covenant or a promise, and it initiates a decisive action.
So it's remembrance leading to action.
Precisely. It's God actively intervening to fulfill an implicit commitment he made to preserve Noah and, through him, his creation. It's God's faithfulness in motion.
That's a crucial distinction. It really does transform our understanding. It takes it from a passive thought into an active, life-changing moment for Noah and everyone on the ark.
Yeah.
And this remembering leads directly to an action, specifically that he sent a wind over the earth. Now, this isn't just a gentle breeze, is it? It seems to carry much more weight here.
It carries immense weight, absolutely. That wind is another incredibly significant term. The Hebrew word ru is wonderfully rich.
Ru, okay.
It can mean wind, yes, but also breath or spirit. Scholars like Gordon Wenham and Terence Fretheim both emphasize this profound dual meaning.
Wind, breath, spirit, wow.
Right, so while it certainly functions as a natural wind dispersing the floodwaters, it also powerfully evokes God's spirit. You'd have to think back to Genesis 1.2, right?
Where God's spirit hovered over the waters during creation.
Exactly. So it's a clear signal of a divine recreation process happening here. The world had effectively returned to a state of watery chaos, much like before creation.
A kind of undoing.
Precisely. And now, God's root is once again bringing order, separation, and life. It's God initiating the systematic reversal of the judgment. He's breathing new life into a world plunged back into watery disorder.
So it's not just weather, it's theology.
It's profound theology. It's a statement about God's ongoing, active, intimate involvement in restoring his creation.
It's almost like a divine reset button then, preparing the canvas for new life. With God's very breath, his ruah, bringing about this transformation, it really sets the stage for a new beginning.
It does. This single verse truly is the narrative pivot, as we'll definitely explore in more depth later. It shifts everything from judgment to restoration, initiated by God's faithful remembrance and his powerful, life-giving presence.
Okay, moving on to verses 2 and 3. The fountains of the deep and the floodgates of heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The water receded steadily from the earth. At the end of the 150 days, the water had gone down.
Right. So these verses describe this remarkably precise, methodical process. It's directly reversing the very means by which the flood began back in chapter 7.
The sources of the water are being shut off.
Exactly. And John Walton, who's done so much work on ancient Near Eastern cosmology, he explains that fountains of the deep and floodgates of the heavens, these weren't just poetic phrases for them.
They thought of them as actual barriers.
Yes, literal cosmic barriers holding back these chaotic waters above and below. So their closure here signifies God reestablishing, consolidating the cosmic order. He had temporarily unleashed for judgment.
Okay.
Notice, it wasn't an instantaneous disappearance of water. It was steady, gradual. It speaks to God's meticulous control, both in the judgment and now in ending it. No randomness here.
It's deliberate, ordered. And that mention of 150 days is quite specific. What does that time frame tell us? Is that how long it took for all the water to go down, or something else?
That's an excellent question. And it's critical, often misunderstood. Scholars like Nahum Sarna in the JPS Torah commentary, and also Kiel and Delitzsch in their classic work, they suggest this 150-day period refers to the entire duration from the flood's onset until the waters reached their peak and then began to significantly recede.
Ah, okay, so not the whole receding period.
No. So for 5 long months, the waters dominated the earth. A period of complete, utter judgment, annihilation outside the ark.
5 months of that. Wow.
Only after that full cycle, that extended period of judgment, did God's mercy really begin to manifest in the water's abatement, starting with his remembrance in verse 1. It underscores the immense scale and duration of the judgment.
And therefore, the profound nature of God's intervention after that.
Exactly. It's a test of ultimate patience, not just for Noah, but it also reveals God's own comprehensive timeline. His work unfolds according to his perfect will, not our impatience.
So it's about the peak of the judgment and the very beginning of the reversal. That adds a new, very weighty layer to understanding the severity and scope. It highlights divine precision.
Yes, absolutely, even in judgment.
Okay, let's continue with verses 4 and 5. And on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The water continued to recede until the 10th month, and on the first day of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains became visible.
Right, here we get 2 more crucial date markers. It really reinforces the meticulous timing in this account. First, the ark resting on the mountains of Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month.
And it's important you mention that it's mountains, plural.
Vital. Ararat refers to a broad mountainous region, ancient Urartu, think modern-day eastern Turkey, Armenia. Not a single peak like in later tradition. The text uses the plural.
Okay, so a region, not one specific spot.
Correct. And the significance isn't just geography. It's theological.
Yeah.
Stability. Safety. After drifting helplessly for 150 days, this is the first tangible sign of solid ground.
A divine anchor, you called it.
That's a good way to put it. An immense sense of security and hope after months on chaotic waters. God providing a literal foundation.
So the ark found its resting place, a clear sign of hope. But the journey wasn't yet over. The landscape continued to reveal itself gradually.
Exactly. The next milestone is the first day of the 10th month, when the tops of the mountains became visible. Now, this is roughly 74 days, think 2.5 months after the ark first grounded.
74 days later, that really underscores how slow this was.
Incredibly slow and gradual. And Gordon Wenham in the Word Biblical Commentary points out these precise dates, down to the day, are characteristic of what scholars call the priestly source, or P.
The P source, known for its emphasis on order, dates, divine purity.
That's right. This meticulous dating emphasizes God's orderly, profoundly planned involvement in salvation. James McKeown even highlights a potential symbolic link of that date, the 17th day of the 7th month, to Passover timing.
Hinting at a new Exodus, deliverance into a land of promise.
It's a possibility, some see. It's definitely an unfolding revelation, requiring Noah's continued observation and, most importantly, his patient trust. The precision leaves no room for chance.
It really reinforces God's deliberate, sovereign control over every minute detail of this new beginning. Okay, now we move into one of the most vivid parts of the story, Noah sending out the birds. Let's read Genesis 8, verses 6 through 12. After 40 days, Noah opened a window he had made in the ark and sent out a raven, and it kept flying back and forth until the water had dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove to see if the water had receded from the surface of the ground. But the dove could find nowhere to perch because there was water over all the surface of the earth, so it returned to Noah in the ark. He reached out his hand and took the dove and brought it back to himself in the ark. He waited 7 more days and again sent out the dove from the ark. When the dove returned to him in the evening, there in its beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. Then Noah knew that the water had receded from the earth. He waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again, but this time it did not return to him.
This sequence is just a masterclass in ancient narrative, often attributed by scholars like John Sailhamer to the Yoistic or J tradition.
Known for its vivid detail that focus on human interaction.
Exactly. So Noah first sends out a raven. An unclean bird in later Mosaic law, known for scavenging adaptability, kept flying back and forth, meaning it found some place to land.
Maybe on carcasses
Yeah.
or newly exposed mud.
Probably. But crucially, it didn't bring back clear evidence of new life or suitable habitation. It was a general scout, yeah.
Yeah.
Capable of existing in that still desolate landscape, but not giving Noah definitive information about recovery. It's a picture of survival in a still unsettled world.
And then a very different choice, the dove. What's the significance there, practically and symbolically? Why the shift?
That's a key interpretive moment. The dove is purer, more discerning. It needs truly dry ground, established vegetation to perch and nest. As Kenneth Matthews notes, it's a much more precise detector of the Earth's actual condition.
A better indicator of habitability.
Right, and the first time, the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot. The Hebrew is mono. Victor Hamilton points out mono as powerful. It's not just finding a place to stand.
But finding a stable, settled home, like in Ruth.
Exactly. Security, rest. So its return clearly signals the Earth was still largely submerged, inhospitable. Then Noah waits another 7 days.
That 7-day pattern again.
Significant, right? Bill Arnold and others connected to the 7-day creation cycle, hinting powerfully at God's ongoing recreation. This waiting isn't arbitrary. It reflects a divine rhythm, and Noah's patiently observing it.
And the second time, that iconic image, the olive leaf, instantly recognizable even today. Peace, renewal, it must have been incredible for Noah.
Indeed, it's one of Scripture's most enduring images. When the dove returns in the evening with a freshly plucked olive leaf, it's not just a sign. It's tangible, undeniable, living evidence.
Wow. Living.
Trevor Longman III highlights how the olive tree universally symbolized life, prosperity, peace in the ancient Mediterranean. This young, freshly torn leaf declared land wasn't just visible, but life was actively regenerating, thriving.
And Keelan DeLitch noted the resilience of olive trees.
Yes, they can survive long submersion, sprouting quickly. So this was the first concrete promise of a new beginning, a visible testimony to God's remembering, a small, fragile, yet immensely powerful beacon of hope.
A clear sign the earth was truly recovering. And the final test with the dove, what does that ultimately signal?
After another 7 days, he sends it out one last time, and it did not return to him anymore. This is the ultimate definitive signal. The earth is truly ready, fully habitable.
The dove found its mono, its home.
Exactly, implying widespread dry land, established vegetation, and Noah, through this patient iterative process, received full confirmation God's restoration plan was nearing completion. It's a profound illustration of Noah's discerning patience, his reliance on observation, and his submission to divine timing. He's not acting rashly, he's waiting for confirmation.
The gradual revealing of hope, Noah's careful discernment, it really humanizes his experience. You feel his anticipation, the weight of responsibility. Finally, let's look at the concluding verses of this chapter, Genesis 8, verses 13 through 19. By the first day of the first month of Noah's 601st year, the water had dried up from the earth. Noah then removed the covering from the ark and saw that the surface of the ground was dry. By the 27th day of the second month, the earth was completely dry. Then God said to Noah, "Come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number on it." So Noah came out, together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives. All the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground and all the birds, everything that moves on the earth came out of the ark, one kind after another.
Right, the culmination. Noah's 601st year, first day, first month. He opens the ark's covering, visually confirms the surface is dry, his own verification, immense relief, tangible confirmation after so long.
But here's the truly significant part.
Yes, he doesn't immediately leave. He waits nearly 2 more months until the 27th day of the second month, when the earth isn't just dry, but completely dry.
Completely dry, suitable for habitation, cultivation, sustained life.
Exactly. And this extended wait, even after seeing it dry, even after the dove's signals, highlights a critical theological point about Noah's extraordinary character, his faith.
That's an extraordinary display of patience and obedience. He had the visible evidence, clear indications, but he still waited for the explicit divine command. It's like what he saw wasn't as important as what God said.
Precisely. Gordon Wenham in the WBC draws that stark contrast with other ancient flood heroes, like Utnapishtim and Gilgamesh, who just get out and sacrifice immediately.
But Noah waited.
He waited. This highlights a profound theological truth. Noah's ultimate confidence wasn't in his empirical observations, compelling as they were, but in God's explicit command.
Trusting God's word over his own eyes, essentially.
Yes. And John Walton emphasizes that God's direct command, "go out," showcases his supreme authority as the cosmic ruler, establishing the new order. Then, when they finally emerge, God reiterates the original creation blessing from Genesis 1, "Be fruitful and multiply."
A recreation, a renewed commission.
It is. And Claus Westermann in the Continental series observes the beautiful structural symmetry between entering and exiting the ark. It emphasizes God's complete sovereign control over the entire process, from judgment to salvation. It's a beautifully choreographed divine dance. #, in-depth scholar insights.
Wow. Our deep dive into Genesis 8 just keeps revealing more layers, and our study note highlights some truly fascinating insights from scholars that I think will be genuine aha moments for many of us listening. What's a particular insight that you think fundamentally shifts our understanding of this passage?
Okay, let's unpack this with something truly profound. One of the most insightful observations comes from Gordon Wenham. He argues, very convincingly, that the entire flood narrative, Genesis 6 right through to 9, is meticulously structured as a large chiasm.
A chiasm, that literary structure where elements are presented A, B, C, then C, B.
Yeah.
Like a mirror image.
Exactly. And Wenham shows its absolute center point, the pivot, is Genesis 8.1. But God remembered Noah.
Right in the very middle, God's remembrance. What does that intricate structure truly tell us about the story's core message? That sounds like it reorients everything.
It's incredibly powerful, and it completely reorients our focus. Wenham demonstrates it step by step. It moves from Noah and sons, God's decision to destroy, building the ark, entering the ark, the flood starting, waters rising 150 days.
Building up the judgment.
Yeah, precisely. Then the absolute pivot, the heart. But God remembered Noah. And after that central point, the structure beautifully mirrors itself in reverse. Waters receding 150 days, flood ending, checking with birds, leaving the ark, Noah's sacrifice, God's promise not to destroy, and ending with Noah and his sons again.
That's absolutely fascinating. So this literary brilliance ensures the whole epic isn't centered on the destruction or even Noah's righteousness,
but squarely on God's gracious and active remembrance. It makes God's faithful character the ultimate protagonist.
Wow. That changes how you read the whole thing.
It does. It highlights that everything, judgment, preservation, new beginning, revolves around God's faithful character and his sovereign initiative to save. The wave of judgment peaks at 8.1, and then because God remembered, it recedes, giving way to salvation and new creation. It's profound theology embedded right in the literary architecture.
A powerful reminder that his mercy is always at the core, even amidst judgment. That's truly an aha moment.
It really is.
And speaking of God's character and his active presence, you mentioned earlier the dual meaning of root, wind, and spirit. Terence Freithheim offers a unique, maybe even radical perspective on this, doesn't he?
He absolutely does. And it's a view that challenges a purely instrumental idea of God's work, God just pulling levers from afar. Freithheim in The Suffering of God suggests the wind in 8.1 isn't just a tool God sends,
Okay.
but rather it's a direct manifestation of God's own active presence and creative power. When the world plunged back into watery chaos, God's root once again moved over the waters, just like Genesis 1.2.
So God himself, in his spirit, actively bringing order back.
That's Freithheim's point. It wasn't merely a natural force, it was God being present and actively involved in the restoration through this powerful, life-giving root.
So not just God setting the wind, but God being the wind, in a way, actively bringing restoration. That blurs the lines we often draw between natural and supernatural.
Precisely. It pushes against a view that too sharply separates God's activity from the natural world he established. Freithheim argues God often works through that natural order. The wind is both natural phenomenon and divine act, inextricably linked.
A more holistic vision of God's continuous involvement.
Yes, even in what seem like natural processes. It means we don't always need a flashy miracle to see God at work. Sometimes his power is felt in the subtle, consistent workings of his creation. It invites us to see the divine hand in the everyday.
That's a beautiful and expansive thought, broadens our view of divine action. And speaking of deeper roles, John Walton, known for his work on the cosmic temple idea, he puts forward a fascinating idea about Noah's role here. Can you unpack his insight?
Yes, Walton suggests Noah actually takes on a profound priestly role within the flood narrative, especially during the ark's grounding and the post-flood period.
A priestly role? How so?
He views the ark not merely as a rescue vessel, but as a miniature moving sanctuary, a sacred space.
Like a mobile holy of holies.
In a sense, preserving a select, sanctified group, Noah's family, clean animals, from a world contaminated by judgment, is preserving holiness amidst defilement and chaos, sacred ground in a cleansed world.
Okay, so the ark as a sacred space, how does Noah's practical act of sending out the birds fit into this priestly idea? Is it more than just observation?
Walton provocatively argues that sending out the birds can be understood as a priestly exploration, or even a form of divination. Now, not in a superstitious sense,
Right.
but in a reverent, discerning way. In ancient cultures, priests sought divine will, the right time for sacred actions, through rituals, omens, careful observation. Walton suggests Noah isn't challenging God, but diligently seeking to understand God's timetable for the new world.
Fulfilling a mediating role, discerning when the holy remnant could re-engage with the cleansed earth.
Exactly. It's an active, reverent probing of God's intentions. And then, when they finally exit onto the clean earth, it's like inaugurating a new cosmic temple, and Noah's immediate act, building an altar, offering sacrifice in 8.12.
The quintessential act of a high priest consecrating renewed creation.
Precisely. This elevates the story from just history to a profound narrative of cosmic reconsecration, establishing a new divine order, with Noah as its foundational priest.
That insight really adds a whole new dimension. It transforms it into a deeply theological, even liturgical event. Makes Noah much more than just a survivor.
Absolutely. He becomes pivotal in redemptive history, laying groundwork for a new relationship between God, humanity, and creation.
And just circling back to the birds for a moment, the contrast between the raven and the dove, that also carries significant symbolic weight, doesn't it? Beyond just practicality.
It truly does. While scholars like Matthews and Hamilton affirm the practical wisdom raven survives harsh conditions, dove needs dry land. There's rich literary symbolism, too.
Okay.
Wenham notes the striking contrast. The raven, often associated with darkness, scavenging, uncleanliness later on, represents the persistence of the old, defiled world. It flies to and fro, sustains itself, but brings no clear news of a clean new start.
Reinforcing the lingering judgment and desolation.
Exactly. It sets a dramatic contrast for the dove. The dove, purity, peace, hope. And as Longman emphasizes, the olive leaf isn't just any leaf, it's freshly plucked.
Signifying immediate new growth, vigorous life returning, God's peace.
Yes, and Calendalich's point about olive tree resilience makes it plausible and powerful. It's the first tangible evidence of recreation in full swing, fulfilling God's remembrance.
And this whole period of patient observation, sending birds, waiting.
It teaches us God's salvation has his own divine timetable, often different from our expectations. The earth being safe, as Noah observed, wasn't the same as God's appointed time for re-entry.
Maybe the earth needed more time to recover fully.
Hamilton suggests that too. Time to become suitable not just for survival, but for thriving cultivation, ecosystems, habitation. It wasn't just Noah's test, it was necessary restoration. Some even draw parallels to Israel's 40 years in the wilderness.
A period of waiting and testing before the promise.
Right. Both show that after deliverance, there's often a crucial transition requiring dependence on God's timing. We observe, prepare, but the final go-ahead comes from Him. #Todious application.
Wow. This deep dive into Genesis 8 has truly uncovered layers of timeless truth, so much about God's character, His plan. Now, as we bridge these ancient truths to our lives today, how do these insights resonate, especially for pastors, for those of us in ministry? What are the core teachings for our faith and practice right now?
This passage offers truly powerful, deeply comforting reminders, especially in the often turbulent landscape of ministry. First, it teaches us about trusting God's active remembrance, even in our own storms.
Personal storms, congregational storms.
Exactly. The whole story, as we saw with the chiasm, turns on, but God remembered Noah. Not passive recall, active, redemptive turning. For us, this means even in our deepest hardships, family crisis, challenging church season, societal turmoil, God hasn't forgotten us.
That's huge.
His zakar is always linked with his saving action, as Kenneth Matthews points out. Our greatest comfort, our deepest peace in distress, comes from knowing God is covenantly faithful. He will act in his perfect time to fulfill his promises, bring deliverance.
So as pastors, we can bring that profound assurance to our people.
Absolutely. Remind them God's faithfulness is an unshakable anchor in any storm. Even when his presence feels distant or his plans unclear, it lets us preach hope and stand firm.
That's such a vital message in a world often feeling chaotic, a theological bedrock. What's another key takeaway we can apply?
Another crucial lesson, tied right to Noah's example, is the profound importance of patient waiting for God's perfect timing. Noah's patience is remarkable, deeply countercultural.
Over 7 months after landing, even with the signs.
Right. He didn't rush out just because he had evidence. Wenham contrasts this sharply with other flood heroes. Noah's inaction was an act of profound faith, submitting to God's sovereign timetable.
And our culture demands instant results, immediate gratification.
Exactly. In ministry, too. We pray, expect immediate results. We push initiatives maybe before God's clear leading. Noah teaches us true faith involves humbly submitting to God's schedule. His right time might not be our expected time.
So for pastors, it means modeling and teaching patient endurance.
Yes. How to minister effectively even in seasons of slow progress. How to trust God's timing is always precisely right for his redemptive purposes, even when it feels painfully slow. Waiting forms character, deepens reliance on God.
Challenging but deeply freeing to release our timeline, embrace his, requires a different kind of faith, finding peace in uncertainty. What final message does this passage impress on us?
This narrative also powerfully calls us to live with an active hope for new creation. Wenham and Walton rightly describe the flood's end not just as judgment ending, but as recreation.
God's rule moves, land reappears, the blessing be fruitful and multiply echoes Genesis 1.
Right. The olive leaf becomes that potent symbol of new life breaking forth. This gives us, as believers, hope transcending current struggles. Just as God cleansed and renewed the world then, he promises a complete new heavens and new earth.
Isaiah 65, Revelation 21.
Exactly. Our Christian life, in many ways, is lived in the ark, waiting with anticipation for that ultimate new creation. Our struggles are temporary, like the wait in the ark, and the dove with the olive leaf.
A symbol of the good news, Christ's resurrection.
In a profound sense, yes, foreshadowing a new world without sin, tears, death. This eschatological hope empowers us to endure, serve with purpose, live meaningfully now, knowing a glorious future awaits.
And one more vital point, building on all this, is that beautiful dynamic tension we see between God's absolute sovereignty and profound human responsibility.
Yes, God initiated everything. Remembered, sent the wind, commanded entry, commanded exit. The whole plan was his. But Noah wasn't passive at all.
He diligently built the ark, stewarded life inside, wisely used the birds.
He actively participated, showing responsible, discerning obedience. This teaches us our faith isn't fatalistic passivity doing nothing, waiting for God, nor is it humanistic self-reliance trying to achieve it all ourselves.
So as ministers, as believers,
We're called to actively obey, be faithful stewards, carry out our part with diligence, wisdom, while simultaneously entrusting the ultimate outcome and timing to God's sovereign hand. This balance lets us serve with both zeal and peace, our efforts consecrated by his control. #tag summary.
Today, our deep dive into Genesis 8 has really shown us this ancient story is so much more than just a historical account of a flood. It's a profound narrative about God's enduring character.
Especially his active remembrance and covenant faithfulness towards his creation, his people. It reveals a God intimately involved, purposeful in every detail.
And it's such a powerful testimony to the virtue of patient obedience. Noah's willingness to wait for God's explicit command, even after seeing clear signs, that's a timeless lesson.
It reminds us God's timing is always perfect. Our faith is often refined in those quiet periods of trusting anticipation, allowing his plans to unfold in their fullness, his glory to be revealed.
It's truly a rich passage, deep insights for our spiritual walk, our understanding of God, our leadership and ministry, offers both challenge and immense comfort. #tag faith reflection. As we conclude today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought for reflection, especially for those of you serving in ministry. In your own ministry and personal walk, how has embracing God's perfect timing rather than rushing ahead with your own plans allowed you to witness his at-creation power unfold in truly unexpected and profound ways?
Consider how often we, in our genuine zeal, maybe even anxiety about the needs around us, try to force outcomes or accelerate processes, even with good intentions. Noah's story challenges us, doesn't it? To sit in that tension of knowing without acting until God gives the explicit command.
That tension is real.
Think about the spiritual discipline required to wait when you have compelling evidence to move forward. When you see the olive leaf of opportunity, but you haven't yet heard the clear go out from God. How might adopting Noah's patient posture deepen your trust in God's sovereignty? Not just over the grand scheme, but in the intricate details, the precise timing of your calling, the lives you shepherd.
It's not passive waiting, is it?
No, it's active, faith-filled submission. And it often prepares the circumstances for a more profound, divinely orchestrated new beginning than we could ever achieve by our own haste or human strength. It's really an invitation to deeper dependence and ultimately greater fruitfulness.